All right. Hey, I'm Ken Krugler, founder of AI for Community. Um, Retired from tech industry about 2 years ago, and I love teaching. So this is so much fun. And what's great about these meetups is it's always a topic that's interesting to me that I'm like finding out about. And when I have to do these meetups, that's when I really learn it. Like that's when you teach something, that's when you really get into it. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen and starting this slideshow. Can everybody see that? Is that good? All right. So I titled this Super Deep Research. And the reason why is because I've been using deep research for various things, but I ran up recently against a challenge where I realized I could do better. And I hadn't seen this approach discussed, and I thought it was really interesting. So it covers both deep research and sort of even deeper research or super deep research. So what do I mean by that? Well, what's deep research? Let's start there. It's a mode that you can put every one of these three big AI services into. ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all have a deep research mode, which changes how it works. When you're in deep research mode and you give it a prompt, there's a special model that the AIs run internally to take your question and turn it into a research plan. And then that research plan, you get a chance to review and edit. And then when you say go, it executes the research plan. And it's typically a multi-step process where it's grabbing a bunch of information off of the web. It's like combining that, synthesizing it together. And typically the outcome is some kind of report, right? And when I say it goes out and it grabs dozens of sources, okay, that's like a low ball. My typical deep research thing that I do often winds up fetching from hundreds of websites. And it's doing this in parallel. Like it's like a super researcher, right? Imagine somebody who could fire off 100 parallel web searches, grab those results, quickly read through all of them and combine them together. Like that would be an amazing research assistant. That's what it's acting like, right? So I'll qualify this a bit. In the past, this was only something through a paid subscription. More and more now, it's available from even just a free subscription, but with really tight limits on what you can do. So typically, to effectively use deep research, you've got to have a paid subscription. Um, Normally, when you do a query to AI where there's no other configuration that's happening, AI has a bunch of information that was used to train the model. And that data has a cutoff date that typically is like a year ago. So it's not current. And in many ways, it's kind of much more limited than going out and fetching content from the web because that data has been encoded into the model as probabilities for like words following words as a predictive model. It's not in some ways factual, right? So if you're just relying on what's in the model, you have issues with, for example, a lot more hallucinations if you're talking about like doing a research report versus having to go out and actually fetch pages, documents, et cetera, from the web and using that as the source of truth, right? Um, so when you enable deep research, suddenly it becomes possible to do things that you know, evaluate this funding opportunity where it's going out and it's getting the PDF that's the funding opportunity and it's following links off of that and it's doing research on the organization that's the funder. It's collecting all this information that you might pay somebody, you know, the equivalent of like a day or two to do a deep dive on this, and it can do it in a matter of minutes, right? So it's an incredibly powerful feature. So doing a deep research report is a good start, but each one of these AIs, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, has different training data. It's got different strategies. And that means it has different, I'll call them blind spots, right? When I ask Gemini for a report, when I ask Claude for a report, I'm getting one perspective with one set of sources that's a partial set of all the data that's out there, right? And If you ran multiple reports across all these different AIs, you would get contradictions that are really interesting and valuable because the contradictions expose both holes in the data and often sort of incorrect assumptions being made during the analysis of the data. It's similar to if I had a report that I really cared about, I might ask three different people, three different consulting companies to generate reports. And then I'd get those three reports and I would look across them and I'd say, okay, what do they agree on? That seems like it's probably really true. What do they disagree on? That's really interesting to poke at, right? If you really cared about the outcome. So this approach we're talking about here is multi-source synthesis. Um, Single report, it's reasonable versus combining multiple AIs gives you a really exhaustive report. Now, obviously, I talk about in my AI in depth class, deep research is heavy in terms of like time it takes, the token capacity for your paid subscription, and it's using more energy. It's got a bigger environmental impact. For the ethical side of AI, it's something to think about, right? So you only want to do this when you really, really care about the outcome. So where did this all come from, this demo that I'm about to do? I said, okay, let me just do a regular Gemini research report. And what I'm trying to do is find community-owned channels. So we're talking about like Facebook groups, LinkedIn, newsletters that are for nonprofits where it would make sense for us to put information about the training that we provide. So it's an outreach, like it's a marketing communications outreach channel. What are all those channels out there? And I did a research report using Gemini. And again, as I cover in the AI in depth class, I had a set of things I knew should be in the report that I had manually extracted so I could validate the results. I'm going to iterate this point again. When you're doing deep research, it is incredibly important to figure out how you're going to validate the result before you generate the report. Because once you see that report, oh, it looks so good. It looks so professional. It looks like you paid $5,000 for that report, which means once you see it, you start getting confirmation bias. It starts influencing your ability to assess it. So it's really important before you actually run the query to generate the report that you've got in hand some approach to validate it, whether that's manual research, independent research I've done, or there's somebody who really knows this result and I can just give them the report and say, tell me what you think. All right, how am I going to validate it? When I did this, I had a couple set points, things that I knew about. One of them was like, I know that the League of California Community Foundations has a really good mailing list that I would for sure want to be in. And Gemini's report didn't have that. And Gemini's report also said, hey, you got to spend $2,500 for placement in this like list where there's no way that's justified given that I'm only charging $60 or $100 for a class. So the number of actual signups I'd have to get would be ridiculous. These are examples where I look at that. I'm like, the report has issues. So I looked at tuning up my prompt and regenerating the report. But this is where I said, this is really important to us. This outreach is going to be our key thing over the next 3 months. So this is an example where it makes sense for me to do a synthesis across 3 different AIs. All right. I mean, I got a huge amount of data out of it. So there's like, okay, there's a lot of information there, but there are gaps, right? There were issues with it, which shows what a single AI was missing. So I'm going to run 3 reports and synthesize. So now we're going to take a look at a quick demo of what the result was. This is the final report, right? It's the combined reference report, internal staff use. And it talks about the sources, 3 deep research reports, reconciled against a Gemini deep research report fact check of 23 disputed claims, right? And it's like talks about how to read this document, like we have verified, corroborated, or single source, right? Which is like exactly what you'd want from a really good research report. Like give me a sense of how much I can trust each thing in here. It has a nice overview about these different styles or different areas of communication channels. it identifies some market shifts that are important. And then it has these tiers, like, okay, we're talking about newsletters and editorial directors, tier 1 verified, right? And for each one, the report's got the channel name, the audience, how to get in, what it costs, and any notes about it. Like this right here is a very effective sort of summary of each one of these. Tier 2, corroborated but not fact-checked, dead ends, and then it goes on to online communities. And then we get on to community foundation and grant maker channels. And it talks about a comparison of these different channels, recommended prioritization, open questions, appendix, what fact check change, right? 9-page report. This report is now like at the kernel of what our outreach is going to be, right? So how did I create this report? Now we're going to talk about that. There's kind of 4 layers to it. I just showed you, I'm doing an onion here. So I just showed you the final report, right? How did I get that? There's a step there where I'm like synthesizing the multiple reports I generated from each of the different AIs, coming up with what are the contradictions, generating a research prompt to resolve those contradictions, and rolling that contradiction report into the final report, right? That's layer 2. If I go deeper, it's like, how did I do each of those individual deep research reports? And then I'm going to show you how I generate great research prompts, right? Which I think it's like crazy. This is the way for sure. This totally works. So this is the big demo here. All right. So here, oh yes, Erica. Ken, we're using Gemini available for nonprofits. Anjali, I'm using the Gemini workspace plan for nonprofits. So it's, the Gemini models that I have available through the nonprofit pricing. I mean, Gemini Workspace is like such a great deal for nonprofits. It's $8.50 per person for email, calendar, Google Drive, Gemini, Notebook LM. I mean, even if your organization says, whatever, we're using Claude, it still makes sense to get Gemini Workspace or to get Google Workspace and vice versa, because Claude's only $8 a month. I mean, the value is so huge. I'm going to bring up a little side point. I did a presentation for a group where I was talking about this point, and a person said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that because the training for every tool is such a burden on our organization that we can't justify it. And I think that's true for traditional tools, but for AI, so much of like the AI interface is so similar that I don't think it's a heavy lift to have people in your organization using more than one AI service, right? Because they're so similar. All right. So, how did I generate that report? I needed a prompt, and I use Claude Artifacts. So over here in Claude, you have this ability to create artifacts where Claude kind of interrogates you, like, what kind of thing do you want to create? And all right. And here I said, what would you like to create? And I said, okay, I got 3 different research reports. I want to ask Claude, using the latest Fable 5 model, to synthesize the reports. I wanted to generate a list of inconsistencies, along with the deep research prompt I can use with Gemini to resolve factual inconsistencies, etc. It asked me a couple questions. I answered those questions, and it came up with this prompt over here on the right. And if you look at this prompt here, like this is a great prompt for Gemini, for Claude, sorry, for Claude Fable 5. Like it's very explicit about what it wants it to do, what it doesn't want it to do. Like it says, what's the output structure, like the inconsistency analysis, high risk, numbered, medium risk, numbered. I reviewed this prompt and I looked at this and I said, this seems good, right? This prompt here versus me handcrafting this prompt would have taken me so much longer and it wouldn't have been as good, right? So using Claude Design to help create the prompt that I use for either when I'm using a deep, like a heavy model where there's a real cost to using it, like Fable 5 for Claude, or I'm doing deep research, is incredibly valuable. So then what happened? Well, I took that prompt over here. That's this prompt. You can see I got 4 documents here, right? The document on the far right is the prompt, and that's just that thing off to the right that I was just showing you that I created with Claude Design. And I gave it the 3 research reports. And yes, I have a typo for Claude research result. Yes, Erica.
We have a
Oh,
question in the chat.
why use an artifact rather than normal chat to get the recommended prompt? Claude Artifact puts Claude into this mode where once it knows what you want, it starts asking you questions. It basically interviews you in a very proactive way. So I find that incredibly useful when I'm creating a prompt. As an example, there's other use cases for it, but creating a prompt, Claude Artifact is very helpful. It's not that it's, you know, I don't know if it's twice as good as like just using Claude, but it makes it really easy for me. Right.
And I have a question as well. Where are you now? You've got these 4 artifacts
And I'm
pasted
in
in what?
Claude. I'm in
Just
Claude.
mm-hmm.
I've started a new chat in Claude. I
Just a regular chat.
selected
Okay.
I selected the Fable 5 model, which was just released yesterday. It's, everybody's talking about the Claude model mythos. That was like the one that was finding all the security flaws. This is the safe version of that doesn't let you do cybersecurity stuff in it, but it has all of the other advances. And if you're reading online what you can do with Fable 5, it's pretty amazing. Like people have it running on things that take it 9 hours, like, involving hundreds of steps, and it does it successfully. So this is the most powerful model available across any of the AI services currently. And it does have extra cost associated with it, right? When you're using this model, it's burning through my token capacity very quickly, which is again why I use Claude Artifact to make sure I created a good prompt for it. Because I don't want to run this twice or 3 times. Like iterating on it is not the way. You iterate in Claude Artifact to craft a really good prompt. That's where it makes sense. Regular chats, sure. You quickly make your best guess, you see the results, you tune it up, but not for when you're using something like Fable 5 and not when you're doing deep research. All right. So I gave it these 3 things and I read all 3 reports. Here's stage 1 output. So we're in Claude, right, using Fable 5, where the inputs are the 3 deep research reports, 1 from each AI, and that prompt that I created using Claude Artifact. And here's what it came back with. A list of here's high risk inconsistencies, N10 audience reach, N10 guest writing access, right? It comes through and it has, let's see, boom, boom, 17 contradictions that it found. Yes, Erica. Oh, what icon is the Claude artifact? So over here, it's just this thing here on the left side, right? Sometimes, like with Claude, you'll have, you can see like there'll be like a more thing over here, and you have to click on that to get to artifact, depending on how your user interface is configured. All right. So it came up with these high risk inconsistencies, medium risk inconsistencies, and low risk inconsistencies, right? And then, as per my request to it, it built the Gemini Deep Research prompt, right? This is the prompt that I'm going to give to Gemini again to do the fact check of a set of disputed claims, right? This is how I'm going to reconcile the differences that Claude Fable 5 found between those 3 different deep research reports. So here's this very long prompt, right? Because it's going through all of the high and medium risk inconsistencies. It has a couple notes here. Um, so I took that prompt and I put it into Gemini. And why did I choose Gemini here? Right? I could have done a deep research in Claude with ChatGPT or with Gemini. Why did I choose Gemini? In my experience, Gemini is the best at deep research. And the main reason why I think is because Gemini has the best index that it uses for finding the sources that it's going to retrieve in order to do the deep research. Right? So whenever I'm doing deep research, I typically only use Gemini unless I'm doing this synthesis approach where then I'm also going to run it in ChatGPT and Claude. So I dropped this huge prompt into Gemini. Look at this thing. It came up with a plan. I didn't bother reading through the plan. Typically, when I use Claude Artifact, or in this case, Claude, to build a prompt for Gemini Deep Research, I don't need to check the plan. The plan basically mirrors what the prompt is. So I'm just say, start the research. And it builds this result over here, fact-checking analysis for nonprofit sector communication channels and audience metrics. Doesn't that sound like a report I paid thousands of dollars for? Um, and it happened when I was taking a lunch break. So this report goes through one at a time all of the different things that I asked it to go through. I mean, this is a very lengthy report. Like council and foundation scope and access. There's a disputed claim. Final verdict is nuanced. And it talks about what it was able to validate here and what the source URL was that it used to do that validation. And I have one of these sections for each of those 20, whatever it was, 23 high or medium priority contradictions. Yes, there's a question. Oh, um, how did I select deep research versus normal? So I'm here and you can see this is down in here. There's like, if I do this, there's a mode here for deep research that I can select. And that, sorry, that puts it into this deep research mode. Does that make sense? All right. So I've got this amazing fact check report, right? That's trying to reconcile all the differences it found between the three deep research reports. So then back over here in Claude Fable 5, I do the plus thing here and I give it that file. And note I'm using Markdown here, and we'll talk a little bit about why, but I gave it that fact check result. And I said, and this is a prompt I just crafted, I've attached the results on the contradictions. Please use this to create the final report, which synthesizes the three initial deep research reports and fact-checking report. Include notes in the final combined report about any remaining uncertainties. And this right here generated that thing that I showed you at the beginning of the first demo, right? That final report. So that's the final report. Make sense? Any questions about this so far? No? All right, great. Oh, Valerie has a question.
Yeah, I wish I'd asked it earlier because I hate to make you backtrack, but did I hear you say that when you have a Google Business Suite subscription, Gemini comes with it, and Claude is reduced, discounted?
If you have a business, etc., workspace space plan, you get Gemini with it.
Okay.
For nonprofits, there's nonprofit pricing for both that and Claude.
Okay.
And in both cases, Claude's $8 per person per month. Google Workspace is $8.50 per person per month for everything,
Okay.
email, Drive, etc. ChatGPT is also $8 per person per month for the nonprofit plan.
And do you think it could suffice to just use Gemini and Claude?
Yeah, I mean, two is better than one for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
But with ChatGPT, I mean, again, if you're a nonprofit, $8 a month for the people that are maybe doing deep research or need ChatGPT for other reasons, like they're creating images, great. Like give them the $8 a month subscription. All right.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Why, what about other models like Copilot or Perplexity?
Yeah, great question. So Copilot under the hood is using ChatGPT and Claude. So, like Copilot doesn't give me in that case any more sort of diversity of thought. Um, Perplexity could be different. I used Perplexity early on because it was so great at like citing where it got its information from. I found it less useful as the other AIs improved and as I could tune up my prompt or my instructions for these other AIs to say always cite your references, then the advantage of Perplexity started going away. Um, um, so Anjali said it's $20 per person per month. That was ChatGPT used to not have nonprofit. Well, the nonprofit pricing it had was you could get the team plan, which is $25 a month, for $20 a month. That was the nonprofit pricing. But I think about 6 months ago, they started offering the same deal that Claude offers, that Anthropic offers, which is $8 per person per month. And yes, a regular person for regular ChatGPT, it's $20. If you want the team, it's $25 a month if you're not getting nonprofit pricing. All right.
Hey, Ken,
Yeah.
there's one more question about the contradictions. Did you answer that?
Oh, here. How did you select deep research as was known in Gemini? I talked about that. When you looked at the contradictions, how wrong was it and why? Okay, so I spot checked some of the contradictions. The contradictions typically are, there's two main sources of them. One is one AI has more up-to-date information than the other, right? So sometimes, especially Claude, deep research is where Claude is the weakest. Its index is the most out of date. Sometimes the contradiction is because one index just doesn't cover the same things as the other index, right? There are many billions of web pages out there, and not every page is in every index. And the third thing is sometimes it's a nuanced decision about like, oh, can I submit something here just out of the blue, or do I have to be a member in good standing in order to do that? For example, on the same website for an organization, you can get conflicting information. Like they have consistencies across issues across their website. And so on one page it says you have to pay $200. On the other page it might say you have to be a member of our organization. How do the AIs resolve those inconsistencies across one data source? That will be different, and that will then generate inconsistencies between the reports. All right, so I used the same prompt, essentially, almost the same prompt across the three services, right? Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. I always save the results in Markdown, right? Markdown's that text format that includes structural information. That is the sort of safest and most efficient way to share data between AIs. And so since that's what I'm doing, right, I'm taking reports from like ChatGPT and I'm giving it to Claude. That is the format that I recommend everybody using. And then, as I mentioned, these gaps or disagreements between the AI, it's really interesting. That's like where there's some really good meat for the final report. So, here, this is a real quick demo. Basically, for each one of these, I did exactly the same thing, except for ChatGPT, as recommended by Claude Artifact, I added this line here because sometimes when you add this line, it means ChatGPT will not ask you to approve the plan. It'll just do it, which saves me a step. Because I don't actually read through the plan when I generate the prompt using Claude Artifact. But anyway, I basically gave it that prompt that Claude Artifact came up with. And, it's kind of weird. It's not showing the results. So basically, this is what, sometimes ChatGPT has this weird issue where it like forgets about things here. Right here, it said, yeah, I created the report and I can download it. And I'm like, give it to me as Markdown. And it said, okay, here's it as Markdown. And I downloaded it. And I did basically the same thing for ChatGPT. You can see it's in deep research mode down here. All right. And for Gemini, same thing, deep research mode here, and it generated this report over on the right that I saved as Markdown. And over here, in this case, when I paste something big into Claude, it saves it as like a pasted document. And it's weird that it no longer shows that it's in deep research mode here. But I'd selected research mode here for Claude. Right. So that's where I got the three reports from. And I ran them in parallel, right? It's not like these reports have any overlap in service. So I can just fire off three parallel queries and, they'll finish at some point in the future. So then, any questions about this? right? And I don't have a good sense of how many tokens, like how much capacity I burned through with each of these, because weirdly, the AI services don't tell you how much you're using, because I think they want you to just be working away, and then it says, "Oh, you've used up all your capacity. Do you want to buy more?" Right? That's a more effective strategy for them. Um, I Yeah, I thought about showing you. I vibe coded a little web app that lets me put queries into Claude, and it will show me exactly how many tokens it used for that query. And I thought about extending it for this meetup to show me if I'm doing deep research, how many tokens it consumes. It was fascinating because I learned something. When you put a query in, like to any chat, like it's a 100-word query. If you look at the token usage winds up being like 4,000 words or tokens for that short query. I'm like, why? Well, every time you do a query, it adds in something called the system prompt, which is this big long set of instructions that the AI companies give their chatbots to try and put guardrails in place. Please don't be racist, please don't be misogynistic, etc. And it has whatever personalization you provided as part of your AI service configuration, and it includes any memories. If your AI supports memories, those all get implicitly added to the front of your actual short little query, right? So you can wind up burning whatever, 4,000 tokens plus a bunch with a really simple little query. Yes, there was a question. Um, Couple questions, it looks like. Let's see, what do we got here? Can I get a copy of the session? Yes. Okay, we'll do that. Can you now ask it which three outlets give the best bang for the buck, best reach, best targeted audience? Did you? So with that final report, that now is something that I can poke at, right? And that's an example of poking at the final report. I can say things like, what are the top three, given here's my budget, what would you recommend I do? Or here's how much time I've got. I love that one with AI where I can say, I've got 5 hours. Right? Tell me what you think would be the optimal use of those 5 hours given this report. And I'll do it in the context that I've already got set up, right? If I go back here to here, this is the Claude chat where I'm using Fable 5, right? Where it generated the final synthesized report. That report is part of this chat's context, right? So I'm going to save time and money by now asking here those questions about where should I go next? How much, given I have this much time, this much money, etc., what should I do next? I'll do it here because that report is in context. It's loaded into, like, you can think of it as this chat's memory. Anjali, you have a question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of summarize and confirm that I understand. So basically, you used Claude Artifact to generate a really strong prompt, and then you went to each of the different AI tools and you used that same prompt for each of them. You got a report in the MD files
Format.
structure. Then you went back to Claude and you turned on Fable 5, the strongest version, and fed all three of those and asked it to generate a report that shows the contradictions.
Yes.
And then from that contradictions one, you went back to Gemini
Yes.
and you used the deep research tool to have it review all of the reports with the contradictions and do deep research to find the information about the contradictions,
Mhm.
and then took that report and put it back into Claude in Fable 5 to generate
Yes,
the final report.
I did.
Okay.
With two clarifications. So those initial three queries were all deep research queries, right, against Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. And the initial prompt I used for Fable 5 was also something I generated using a Claude artifact.
Okay, so you use Claude Artifact twice.
Right. So this prompt right here is this one about I'm attaching 3 research reports, right? So that was also, this long prompt was also generated via Claude artifact.
Cool.
Make sense?
That's awesome.
Okay. All right. Yes, thanks for doing that recap. So, all right, so now we are back to um, right. And this is, I think I showed you, well, maybe did I show you this? Right. Here is how I created the prompt for doing the deep research. Right. So this is like I finally peeled back everything to that prompt I used. So I'm working with an artifact. I say I want to build something from scratch. It's not one of these predefined things up here. And I'd say I want to create a Gemini deep research prompt. And what's the topic? It asks a couple questions. I said finding newsletters for nonprofits where it'd be suitable to include information about blah, blah, blah. And it asked a few more questions. So this is why I like Claude Artifacts, right? Because it's asking me questions that help me create a really good deep research prompt, right? And it talks about this right here. And I'm like, oh, adjust it. Like after I read through it, also include social media groups and communities and make sure you include information about whether it's free or paid placement. And it came up with this amazing prompt, right? Because the thing is, it asks me questions about what I'm trying to do with deep research that I'm not thinking about, right? And that's a really valuable thing, especially since deep research is expensive, right? Both time and token usage and environmental costs. So we don't want to run it twice. We want to make it a one shot. And Claude Artifact helps me craft a prompt that makes it a one shot. Okay, so contradictions. What do I do with contradictions? Oh, Erica, you have a question.
We have 10 minutes left in this meeting.
Okay, what do we do with contradictions? If they're significant, all right, so that was like the high and medium level contradictions, then okay, I'm going to run additional deep research to resolve the contradictions and feed that result back in there, right? If it's minor, I might just say put those contradictions as footnotes in the report, right? Just so somebody's aware of them. Choosing the right model. So when you're generating the research report, so I always use Gemini, I can pick which model, right? There's sort of fast, there's thinking, and there's pro. So I typically use thinking for research reports. If I'm like I care about hallucination, it's like a factual report. On the other hand, if I'm asking it to do something where there's more nuanced judgment, like I've got multiple research papers, let's say, and I'm asking Gemini to take those research papers, follow links out, synthesize everything together. And I feel like the results of that could be a lot of data. Gemini Pro has this biggest context window. How many PDFs can it keep in its memory at the same time to generate a result? Right, so I would use Gemini Pro in that case. So mostly I use Gemini Thinking, rarely Pro. And then that downstream task of combining the three reports, that's where you want to use the strongest model possible, because that's where it's really getting complicated. And so in this case, I'm using Fable 5. If I was doing it with Gemini, I'd use Gemini Pro. Make sense? And as I mentioned, I mean, you can do some of this with like the free version of Gemini, but you're going to run up against your capacity limits really fast, like before you can actually do anything significant, I found. So takeaways, one report is good, but if I really care, I'm going to get better results by synthesizing them. I build the prompt intentionally using Claude Artifact. I run it against the three AIs. I synthesize those results in Claude. I generate another prompt to resolve the contradictions. I'm always thinking about how am I going to validate the end result before I go through this whole process, right? How am I going to be able to fact check the AI? And to Ronnie's point, like I'm the editor, AI is the researcher. If it tells me something like that initial Gemini deep research where I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I spend $2,500 on a mailing list? You have to push back on it. And when I get that final report, I can use AI to poke at it. Like, are you sure about this? And like, let's take this big section and summarize it into something smaller because I don't have time to read this 20-page massive whatever thing. Give me a 500-word summary of it. You're in charge, right? You're the boss. AI is your coworker or minion. a very talented and hardworking minion, but still you get to decide, right? All right. Let's open it up for any final things. Yeah, I can share that final report. I mean, obviously for Scott for, internal use only. But yes, I'd be happy to do that as one of the artifacts from this talk. A couple hands up. Mark.
Yeah, a couple things. So this is terrific. Thank you so much, Ken. I've never done a three-peat. I have done a lot of research with a single pass, and what I've often done in the prompt is tell the AI to give me a confidence level.
Mhm.
And sometimes it'll do its own sort of validation to say, and it was exactly what you said. It may not be a hallucination per se, but just that the sources actually, if it's not settled science, there might be some nuance, or it might be, and
Oh, we lost you, Mark. He's frozen. All right. Anjali. Oh, hey, Mark. You
okay,
froze for a bit there. I didn't hear
okay,
that last bit.
okay, sorry. I had a couple other things. So, some of my research, I use uh, I get my output as an Excel template, and I actually have a preferred format. So I tell it what my preferred format is,
Mhm.
and it actually dutifully fills it in to my liking. And then also I'll often tell it to post the e-file output as a Word document in a folder of my choosing. So I know exactly where to get my output. And I also, in my instructions, I tell it, do not send any emails. If you're doing any sort of Claude, powerful, co-work, whatever, I tell it, do not delete anything. Not that it ever has, but I just want to take precautions.
Mhm. So you're using Claude for
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, thanks. Anjali?
I know you kind of mentioned you can't really see into the usage limits, but I'm just curious, like, how much can you really do? Like currently we have the nonprofit paid version of Claude and we have the free version of Gemini. So we're not paying the $8 per month right now. It's just the free level, which I think has a lot of limitations.
Yep.
So like how much can we really play with research before we're going to start hitting our limits? Is it going to burn through the 5 hour limit in like a one session and then you're locked out for the next 5 hours?
So that is a great question. I'm looking here, like with Claude right now, it looks like it almost thinks I haven't spent anything, um, which is kind of crazy. Claude gives you this dashboard, administrative dashboard, where you can look at like my current balance. Anthropic gave me a bunch of credits because I was a nonprofit and they changed their thing. And so I got like $150 worth of credits and I'm still working my way through them. Um, yeah. So, that Fable 5 report I did, yeah, it didn't actually scratch the surface here. The thing you have to understand, you'll hear about people, spending $20,000 a month on, whatever, Claude credits. But that's programmers who are constantly running these complicated, like multi-hour jobs and like sometimes 10 of them in parallel. So they are consuming hundreds of millions of tokens a month. That's not what we had here, right? A 10-page report, I don't know, maybe it's 100,000 words or something. That's well within, any limit, even in a 5 hour window. Now, if I did this multiple times in a row, I think I would probably hit like Anthropic's 5 hour window kind of boundary. But again, now I don't know about Gemini free. I don't use the free Gemini plan, so I don't know how tight those limits are. I wish I could talk to that, but I can't. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. That gives me more confidence to just kind of play around and, yeah,
Yep.
experiment more.
Cool. I think Erica just posted,
Yeah,
yes,
I just want to let people know about the next meetup and the next trainings. So the next meetup will happen on July 22nd, again at 10 a.m. And there are two classes coming up, the AI in depth is happening the 16th and 17th, and that's for those of you who have already taken the AI Essentials. If you haven't taken the AI Essentials, you can take that on July 8th. Were there any more questions or topics for discussion? We have 2 minutes.
Just thank you. This was outstanding. Really appreciate it, Ken.
Oh, sure, Scott. Glad it was useful. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone. It was great to see such a diverse, geographically diverse set of people here today, and I loved all the questions. And Ken, we appreciate you so much. We hope to see you all in July, and we'll give you 2 minutes back. Woo!
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Take
Right.
care.